Sangye Jodan Zogi Shonam La, Jenjo Barda Dani, Yepse Chi, Dagi Jinso Jipa Sonamgi, Drola Penjer Sangye Druparjo, Sangye Jodan Zogi Shonam La, Jenjo Barda Dani, Yepse Chi, Dagi Jinso Jipa Sonamgi, Drola Penjer Sangye Drupar, Sangye Jodan Zogi Shonam La, Jenjo Barda Dani, Yepse Chi, Dagi Jinso Jipa Sonamgi, Drola Penjer Sangye Drupar. Semjen Damjid, Wadande, Wagudan Damarkerchi. Dungal tan dunga gigutan dawargerchi, dunga mewa dewatan mitra wargerchi. Nyerin chana nila ne betonyola ne pargerchi, oma soba wa shodo sabadama, soba wa shodo ham. Coming through the great Milarepa in Tibet are three especially exalted lineages. One of those is his 6 yogas of Naropa. When the 6 are taught, usually they're taught, and when they're called the 6 yogas of Naropa, it's just kind of a key name for them. But when they're taught in a practice way, they become 10 by the preliminaries and adding separating dream yoga from the others and adding Mahamudra, which is the subject of this weekend's workshop, and also adding Karma Mudra, how to use the romantic part of your life for enlightenment. So the 6 become 10 in that way. Otherwise, in many forms of Buddhism, romance isn't seen isn't taught as an asset on the path to enlightenment, but rather they're just really guidelines of how not to misbehave romantically. Whereas in the Tantric tradition, using passion as the path is part of the training. So the 6 yogas become 10 in that way. And that lineage comes to Tibet from Marpa, received from Naropa, received from Tilopa, received from Gantapada, and so forth, going back over the generations. The other great lineage is his lineage that he received from another of his gurus, Drechungpa, who in some instances sometimes is also listed as one of his students, which is the eight generation stage healing yogas and 8 completion stage healing yogas of Amitayus Hayagriva. I've taught both of those lineages here on weekend workshops in Chicago over the years. So some of you will be familiar with those key terms and some of the materials in them. And the third one is the 5-part Mahamudra. Mahamudra in 5 parts or in 5 prongs. I was watching Fox News the other day talking about his about their healthcare reform. He's saying 3 prongs, prong, 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 prong. I think, Trump sort of channels some of my words sometimes. Then I have to stop using them for a year or they're offensive to people's ears. So rather than say the 5-pronged approach to Mahamudra on this retreat, we'll call it in 5 parts or in 5 sections. A word easily becomes unfashionable because of particular contexts of use. And then one is stuck with having to try to build up its popular character all over again from scratch. So Mahamudra in 5 parts or in 5 facets. And one could say that the content is similar to the 6 yogas when the 6 yogas are seen as 10, in that the 5 are a complete path to enlightenment, or can be used as a complete path to enlightenment. And this, again, the lineage was brought to Tibet by Marpa, but he received it from another of his 4 great Indian gurus or Indian masters, in this case Milarepa, the Maitri Yogin, as he's sometimes called. So I like that lineage because my Buddhist name is Maitri, or Milarepa, so he almost sounds like a previous incarnation of mine, at least as far as the name is concerned. And I've taught all 3 of these lineages over the years, and they're 3 of my own personal favorite practices. The main difference with them in that they all have some similar quintessential elements, but different emphases and different details. The detailed applications is very different. In the 6 yogas, the emphasis is on inner heat, inner fire, and the Chandali or Kundalini practices. In the 8 generation stage and 8 completion stage, Amitayas Hayagriva healing yogas, the emphasis is on increasing both the quality of life and the intensity of life. In this lineage, the emphasis is on Mahamudra, bliss and void. Mahamudra as taught in the 6 yogas is a little different than Mahamudra as taught in the Milarepa tradition. In other words, in the 6 yogas, it's the Mahamudra lineage from Marpa, Naropa, Tilopa, Gantapa, and so forth. And here it's the lineage from Milarepa, Marpa, Milarepa. And so a different oral transmission, you could say, with slightly different language and different kind of structure, a little bit of different structures to it. Sometimes if you're training in a traditional way, when you do something, a practice like this, you'll do it over a period of 6 months or a year in a very casual way. For that reason, I often, when I give this teaching, I often call it easy enlightenment, because it's practiced in something you could say of a casual, relaxed way. There's a big emphasis on the relaxed mind. Always, once when the Dalai Lama was talking about it, and the idea of exertion, and exertion being kind of rushing, and rushing being an effort to beat time. The Dalai Lama said, time, there's always more time. It's the one thing until we're enlightened we don't run out of. This lifetime maybe gets cut short eventually, but time is still there for us to chew on for as long as we cycle in the wheel of life. Because one of the 5 is deity yoga, in other words, mandala mantra practice with generation completion stage practice, usually people receive an empowerment beforehand as part of the practice, and you do the practice in conjunction with a sadhana. And empowerments can be done in many ways of various lengths. They can be done over a period of a few months, or over a few weeks, or over a few days, or 2 days, or even a single session. Often they say it has to do with the readiness of the student. When the student is ready, the initiating master just needs to go, I think you guys are all ready, so we'll just leave it at that. But you have to do it a couple of times. Some people you need to do it like 3 times, and with both eyebrows, like. Empowerment really just means a kind of the transmission of the lineage. And in particular, the lineage usually is coming through Milarepa. His main practice was Chakra Sambhara, so it's usually Chakra Sambhara. And his main practice was the 5 deity or the 5 Dakini mandala. So it's usually that empowerment which is given. And usually before the empowerment, one does a little bit of talk and exploration of the general foundations or background. So I thought to do that this evening for the first half of the evening, and by reading from a spiritual instruction written by the 7th Dalai Lama. And the 7th Dalai Lama wrote it as a poem, and he wrote it for one of his 10 or 20 main disciples at the time, at the request of that disciple who wanted to do the Nyenchen, the Great Retreat, which means often in some traditions they don't do 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours, and 3 minutes. But rather they call it Nyenchen, the Great Retreat. So it can be anywhere between about 2 years and 4 or 5 years, depending on the readiness, you could say, or ripeness of the practitioner. So anyway, the poem was written in that context as a poem of instruction. And that Lama eventually went on to become one of the greatest Lamas in Asia. In fact, he became the 7th Dalai Lama's main disciple. And later, he went on to become the guru of the Manchu-Mongol king. So he became, basically of all the Mongols, second only to the Dalai Lamas. His story is very amazing because the Qianlong, that particular Manchu-Mongol emperor, the Manchus had just conquered China 50 or 60 years earlier, 75 years earlier. And they were Tibetan Buddhist by inclination, though a little bit warsome by predisposition. When they had a war with the Dzungars, when the Dzungars lost, they thought, well, maybe we should just behead all the men. So they beheaded 500,000. And then he got a letter from the 7th Dalai Lama saying, I think that's enough. No, not saying that's enough, saying that's not a good Buddhist thing to do. And so then they relented. As the expression goes, war is war. But anyway, 30 years later, this great Lama, Chankhya Ropé Dorje, the main disciple of the 7th Dalai Lama, who also became the guru of the Manchu king. And the Manchus they turned their swords into plowshares. Well, not quite, but they stopped lopping off heads so enthusiastically and dedicated much more of their energy to spiritual pursuits. In fact, several of the 7th Dalai Lama's monk students were sons of Emperor Qianlong, the Manchu-Mongol Emperor Qianlong. And he wrote his main Yamantaka commentaries at the request of that royal monk disciple. So that guy did his 4-year, his Nyenchen, his 4-year retreat. on the Dalai Lama's sadhana of Yamantaka, which I translated actually about 35 years ago or something like that. It was actually the first Yamantaka material to be translated into English in the history of the universe. You never know. There may have been others, you say, because Tantra's secret, only people who catch the secret know. So maybe there were other translations floating around. So I thought in the first part, Tibetans do a lot of talk about Mudra, preliminaries. So for the Mahamudra from Maitreya, the usual 500,000 or 600,000 aren't often done, as they are with the 6 yogas. The 6 yogas, they often do the 100,000 prostrations and 100,000 Vajrasattva practices and 100,000 refuge bodhicitta prayers, 100,000 Guru Yoga prayers, etc. Here, in this, the main basis is the so-called sutra trainings. And after the sutra trainings, then the Guru Yoga and Vajrasattva. Those are the 2 main ones done. In fact, the 7th Dalai Lama wrote a very beautiful little Milarepa Guru Yoga practice that I translated many years ago. And it's in connection with both the 6 yogas and the 5-part Mahamudra. So because it's a tantric lineage, it said we should try to think of our body as pure light and try to think of the place as pure energy and think of those people around us as looking and acting very intelligent. Look at the person next to you and say, "You're looking very intelligent. Ed, you're looking especially intelligent today." Tantra, it said, has 4 great qualities. One of the great qualities, 4 special qualities of tantric practice. And one of the special qualities is only people with very high reincarnation backgrounds can practice it. That's taken 2 ways, to mean 2 ways. All people who encounter the tantric tradition are of very high karmic backgrounds from previous lives. The other way it's taken is like, if you're not in that category, you can practice as much as you like, but you're not going to get a lot of benefit. I prefer the first interpretation. It seems much more user-friendly. Yeah, I think over the years, when you watch people who encounter the Enlightenment tradition, it's very interesting to see the different kind of responses. Some people, when they encounter it, it's almost like coming home after a very long journey, like meeting an old friend or an old lover or something like that, or your mom and your dad after a long way away from home. You have this really very strong feeling of really finding your home. And for other people, it has a sort of a less of a very personal, intimate sense. And then for some people, it just sounds a little bit weird. I remember when I first met the Dalai Lama in 1972, there were about 30 of us, or 35 or something like that, who just sort of wandered into town, some coming to be there and some just backpackers traveling around India on various purposes. And I would say about half were completely overwhelmed by his kind of energy and his beauty and his playfulness and his seeming enlightened quality. And the other half, some were like, oh, he's kind of a very nice guy, interesting. And then there were a couple of like, well, it kind of reminds me of the vicar back in Southampton, who didn't really connect at all. And I know it's like that myself with some lamas I've met. I've met lamas who weren't considered to be especially great beings. But when I met them, I had a very, very strong personal relationship, personal feeling. And as the years passed, my relationship with them became ever deeper and more, just more wonderful, for want of a better word. And others I met, even though they were very famous and had hundreds of enthusiastic students, I met them and I thought, a little bit like an old wet fish. They really didn't touch any chords, or there was no music or no strong feeling of connectivity, no lights shining from their eyes. They just kind of looked like, the butcher down the street or the vegetable seller or, the bank clerk or something like that. And others, it's like very, very strong connection. And the first of the 5 points in the Mahamudra is the connectivity, connecting with the Guru. And that point is always made. It's one's personal connection with those teachers that is in many ways much more important than the qualification of the teacher. I think one reason that's said is because qualification of teachers is hard to know, hard to judge. They have this expression, sangingango, that person looks very enlightened to me. Like whenever I look in the mirror, I always say, that person looks very enlightened to me. And that is one of the indications, I think, of one's connectivity with that particular person, with that particular teacher. And I was reminded of that when I was teaching in Korea about 5 months ago, and one of my very unfamous teachers came over through Korea, age 87 now, and I've been my teacher since the, late 70s, so 40 years or something. And had been one of my many teachers. But even though I hadn't seen him in about 20 years or more, just walking into the room, it was just like I was with him like just yesterday or something like that. That kind of feeling like you get with your mom and dad, even if you've been away traveling the high seas, down like Ulysses gone to, where did Ulysses go? For 20 years. No, he didn't go to Troy, that was someone else, right? He went to the Valley of the Sirens. Sirens or sirens? Which is it? Sirens. Sirens? Thank you. But in that discussion of the guru, it said the 4 types of guru one has to have 4 types. The ultimate nature of one's own mind, being the constant guru or the natural guru. One's own inner spirit, the purity of one's own soul, is one's ultimate guru. And for some beings, that's almost enough. The purity of one's own soul, one's own spirit. Purity is kind of a weak word in English, I guess, but maybe something like more like the radiance, the unstained radiance of one's own soul. There they give expressions like many clouds move through the sky and rainbows, birds, the occasional dragon. But none of them scratch the sky. In the same way, all of us have a quality of our soul which is unscratched, unblemished, undamaged, unharmed by the hundreds and hundreds of ups and downs and goods and bads and indifferences, all the different experiences. That natural radiance of the soul is something always there. And in a way, when we search for enlightenment, we're not really searching for anything outside ourselves, are we? It's really trying to find or discover that very discrete inner essence. So often when we talk about the guru in the five-point Mahamudra, they first mention the ultimate nature of mind or deeper nature of mind or authentic nature of mind. Because otherwise a guru is just the same, a Lama, a spiritual teacher, a meditation teacher, is just the same as someone teaching you how to fish or farm or change a bicycle tire or reboot your computer when it has a problem. Those are sort of little things we need to know in life. But the biggest thing we need to know in life is the discovery of our own inner perfection, our own inner hidden Buddha. So much of the Mahamudra training, you could say 50% part of it at least, is looking at that aspect of the guru. Then in one's own inner natural radiance, one's own inner master. Inner guru, inner teacher, inner master, inner Buddha. The second, the guru, which is one's own experience, the teacher that is one's own experience. And I think one can discuss that from 2 ways, from 2 sides. And one of those sides is how we integrate what we learn when we sit quietly, when we catch glimpses of the deeper nature of our own being or our own soul. How we integrate that. How what we learn through meditation, what we learn through spiritual training, becomes relative to, as they say in the Zen world, chopping wood and carrying water. Because Zen monks didn't drink alcohol and didn't eat meat. They spent a lot of time chopping wood and carrying water, drinking tea and making miso soup. So in a way, the ultimate nature of our own mind is talking about a deeper level of reality, isn't it? So sometimes we just say emptiness of mind. In the last 150 years in Tibet, there's been two ways of discussing it. Emptiness from the perspective of emptiness, and emptiness from the perspective of the mind experiencing emptiness. The empty mind, emptiness mind. And the guru, the teacher, which is one's own experience, is the conventional level of the training, isn't it? How, when you pick up a pointer in your meditation, you bring it into your life. I think it's a little bit like people make New Year's resolutions. They have a good idea. And a couple of days later, what were those New Year's resolutions? I can't quite remember. So when we're meditating, we get particular kind of epiphanies, if you will. Little satoris, or little glimpses of a deeper level of our mind, of life, of whatever you want to call it. The ability to bring that back into day-to-day life, into the way you get out of bed in the morning and make your coffee, and the way you drive as you go to work, and the way you talk to your loved ones or your kids, and the way you deal with difficult people, and all of those kind of issues. The teacher, that is one's own experience. And thirdly, the things one actually learns as part of one's enlightenment training. That's a kind of a teacher itself, isn't it? When we study, we practice, those teachings are a kind of a living teacher. When Buddha got old and people said, well, you're going to be gone soon, that will be very sad, what will we do? And Buddha said, no big deal. If you want to see me, just look at my Dharma, look at my teachings. In other words, the instructions on enlightenment, on meditation and integration and living, those become one's teacher. So in my own case, of the 35 or so teachers, I always bump it up a few. I really only had 27 or 28. But they say it's very negative karma if you forget even one. So I throw in an extra half dozen or so, just so there's always room for one more if he pops up and I see what's it. Oh yeah, 28. And then 2 weeks later it'll be, oh, what about da, da, da? Oh, that's right. It's like when you do Tantric Retreat, of the highest yoga tantras, of his very strict retreat, no one's allowed to visit you who isn't like on your list. So you take a piece of paper and you put like, there's my girlfriend, there's my wife. No, don't do that. Anyway, you put on your various teachers who can visit you and your Vajra brothers and sisters. We say those ones who are accomplished in the practice you're going to do, or mature in the practice you're going to do. And they'll sometimes come by, you'll have them come by, say, the 10th and the 25th of the month to do Sog or self-initiation or any of those kind of practices. And maybe on special days like Yamantaka, the 9th, 19th, 29th, you'll do other kind of practices. So you'll allow a certain number. Then at the end, you put like half a dozen blank faces in case anyone just shows up. I think if you do your retreat in Chicago, you need quite a few blank faces. You'll be sitting at home and it's like, we're taking a poll. What's your opinion of President Trump's performance? And then because you're in a very positive mood from meditation, you'll say, oh great, he's such a wonderful guy. And then you'll be sitting down later meditating and you'll think, what did I say? So you have to put a face for each one. So I do that with my teachers. I've got 27 or 28, maybe 29 or 30. Throw in an extra half dozen blank faces just in case I missed one or two. So of all those teachers of mine who have passed, those lineages, Wang Lung Ti, empowerments, transmissions, and commentarial instructions, as well as Menga, oral transmission events, and so forth. All those 20 or 25 are gone, but the Kagi Lama, they live on within me as the teacher who is instruction, the guru who is instruction. And finally, there's one's living teachers. The teachers one meets and trains under in this lifetime. So yes, I said I'd read a couple of verses from the 7th Dalai Lama. So here we go. Homage to the great master, Je Rinpoche, manifestation of Vajradhara, Lord of all Buddhas, in whose body reside the awakened ones, past, present, and future, as well as their retinues and Buddha fields. So he starts often in all Indian and all Tibetan poetry, they always start with a couple of verses of homage. And if it's ordinary, if it's like a Hinayana level teaching, often the homage is to a Buddha or to the Three Jewels or something like that. If it's a Mahayana teaching, general Mahayana teaching, usually the homage is to a Bodhisattva. Like if it's on the Wisdom Prajna Paramita teaching, it'll be homage to Manjusri. Or if it's emphasizing compassion, it'll be homage to Shenrezi. Or if it's emphasizing meditation, it'll be homage to Vajrapani. One of those kind of, they take that kind of approach. If it's Tantra, very often to the Guru. Ordinary Buddhism, we say Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Three Jewels. In Tantra, we say the Guru, the Mandala deity, the Dakas and Dakinis. So in the Guru's body dwell all the Buddhas past, present, and future. I often quote Nagarjuna, who wrote that on every atom of the world there's 100 enlightened beings waiting to come out. We just have to tune into them. So that's the kind of meaning. Homage to the feet of my own root Guru, who is the real nature, inseparably one with Haruka Chakra Sambhara, male, female, and sexual union, The wheel composed of all objects of knowledge, whose essence is great bliss, clear as the autumn sky. So male, female, and sexual union, usually chakra samvara is shown that way. Stephanie very graciously printed out some little paintings, little photos, and axed them up on the machine in the office room here. The wheel composed of all objects of knowledge, so called Korodencho, called the wheel of bliss, because by means of the practice of Tantra, in particular of chakra samvara, all experiences are made blissful. If it's a good, medium, or bad experience equally, we can pull that experience into the wheel of bliss. And that wheel is composed of all objects of knowledge. In other words, everything that exists, from the hells to the heavens, from violence to anger, hatred, and violence to love and the great pleasure of love. Everything in between can be turned into the wheel of bliss if we practice correctly. And the essence is the great bliss, clear as the autumn sky. The great bliss is not just a kind of a great ecstasy or pleasure, nor a kind of an ecstatic joviality, but rather it's connected to the infinity of being. In other words, connected to the quintessential essence of the emptiness of one's own mind, or the infinity of one's own mind, or the natural purity of one's own mind. Fortunate are beings who meet with this teaching that shows all instructions from Sutra and Tantra, an opportunity obtained but once, yet breath like mist is delicate, life seemingly strong, ever near to passing. So quickly pluck the essence of enlightenment, for definite it is you will die soon at the hands of the great Lord of Death. So one of Buddha's first teaching was the teaching on the importance of meditating on impermanence of death every day. So you get up in the morning and say, could be bye-bye cruel world today. And to live each day with complete integrity, complete appreciation. Someone sent me a note today saying, I'm now 80-something years old, and I was reading this passage that says, if you're old, you should be very celebratory, because very few people live that long. You could already easily be dead. So it's just, like my dad used to say, it's just gravy on the potatoes. Some die in the womb, some die coming out, some die in youth, some die in teens, some die in 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And some live till old age. So he says, breath like mist is delicate. Our life can very quickly and easily end. Dalai Lama likes to say he practices his death 4 times a day, because 4 times a day he does tantric sadhana, visualizing the world dissolving into light, the light into his body from feet up, head down and feet up into his heart, and that going into Mother clear light of mind, just like at the time of death. 4 times a day to remember one's mortality and to be reborn each of those 4 days after you remind yourself of your mortality, to rejoice that the Lord of Death has not yet eaten you. I was reading a passage by a wonderful Sufi master the other day who said, oh, some people think the Lord of Death is waiting for them down the road somewhere. In fact, he's chewing on you right now. However many days of your life have already passed, that's how many days he has already eaten. Life seemingly strong is ever near to passing. We can think I'm very strong, or I'm very rich, or I'm very lucky. But as the expression goes, what comes first, our next life or our next breath? Completely uncertain. So quickly pluck the essence of enlightenment, for definite it is you will die at the hands of the great Lord of Death. Then have not the three doors stood open to negativity, then an inconceivable misery of your own karma can easily fall upon you. And if still weak, you will not be able to bear it. So to think of our own negative karma, say in this life and previous lives, and to develop a strong determination to enlightenment. Often it's said that unless we do that, we're not actually doing much practice. We don't have much fire in our practice. It's more like a stress release or a pleasant pastime. So turn the horse of the mind upward, rein him with the three higher training, strike with the iron whip of fierce effort, and cut into the open door of liberation. And then he goes into the poem to talk about developing love, compassion, kindness, and all of these kind of qualities. So it's said in general, we need three things to practice Tantra. We need three things to practice Mahamudra. Any of these three great lineages from Milarepa. One is we need to have an inner mind which is stabilized by contemplating cause and effect, karma, by the discipline of ethics and meditation and wisdom. Secondly, we need to transcend self-absorption with absorption in the bigger picture of the world. We have to become universal heroines, love and compassion for all living beings. And thirdly, we should get some sort of glimpse of an experience of emptiness and the interconnectedness of all things. When we look at interconnectedness, we should have a sense of emptiness. And when we look at emptiness, we should have a sense of the interconnectedness of all things. And based on that, we take initiation, become great tantric yogis and yoginis, and go on to easily accomplish enlightenment. Without those foundations, it's said that practicing Tantra is a little bit like tying a child to a wild horse. They do it in Mongolia all the time. Actually, in Mongolia, it's very common when a child is like 3 or 4 months old, they'll sit him on the horse and tie him there. But not a wild one.